Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Rita, and today I'd like to teach you how to make a scatter plot on your graphing calculator. I have a sample of data here. I have 14 random cities around the United States, and I have two sets of numerical data. I have their elevation above sea level in feet, and then I also have their mean number of clear days per year. So what I'd like to do is put this data into the graphing calculator and construct a scatter plot. So here is my graphing calculator. And in order to make a scatter plot, first we need to enter the data into a list. So you may recall from one of my previous recordings that when you enter data into a list, you press the Stat button and you edit the list. Now, I have already put the data into list 1 and list 2. If you need a tutorial on that, you can back up to my previous video on entering data into a list. A couple of things though, when you do enter the data, you have to enter the data exactly in the order that it appears in your table, because each of these numbers is creating an ordered pair. So you need the first entry of list 1 to match up with the first entry of list 2. Another thing I always double check is I scroll down and I make sure that I have the same amount of data. So you can see here I have 14 data points for list 1 and 14 for list 2. So I know that I'm going to make ordered pairs. If I try to make a scatter plot without them matching up like this, it would actually give me an error. Okay, now that I have my data in there, the next thing I'm ready to do is make my scatter plot. So right up here, in above the y equals button is in blue text, it says stat plot. Stat plot is exactly what it sounds like. It's where we're going to plot statistical data. So I hit second y equals. And that brings me to some different plots that I can have off or on. Typically, your plots will be off, okay? But you can see here on mine, my plot is on because I was playing with this before I signed on with you guys. So you want to turn on plot 1 and make sure that all the other plots are off. One way you can turn your plots off is just to turn them all off at the same time. And so plots off, done. So now when I go back to stat plot, now all my plots are off. So we're going to go to plot 1. We're going to turn it on by pressing enter on the on. And you can see here you have a different 6 different selections for types of stat plots you can make. You want to select the one that looks like a scatter plot. And you can see here my X list is going to be in list 1 and my Y list is in list 2. If I go back to my data here, you can see here my X list was in the first list and my Y list was in the second list. And here you can choose different marks. I like to use this larger square. It just makes the data easier to see. Now, I'm going to hit graph. And what do you notice? There's no scatter plot. So why is there no scatter plot? Well, that's because my window is completely off. My data isn't within that -10 to 10 window. This is your standard viewing window. So what you need to do is go to window and change your window so that it will fit your data. My X minimum, I'm going to use 0. And for my X maximum, I'm going to go back to my data. And I'm just going to look at what my largest number is. My largest number here is 5,557. So I'm going to say, how about 6,000? Now I have to pick my scale. And so for my scale, I don't know, I'll go up by 500. My Y minimum is 0. And my Y maximum, let's see, let's go back to the data because you want to make sure you can fit all your data. My largest number is 167. So why don't we just say 175? And we'll go up by 25. Okay, now let's see how our graph looks. Hey, there's our scatter plot. Looks pretty good. Now, if we just go back to stat plot, I just want to show you what these different marks would look like. For example, if we chose the smaller mark, you just press enter on it and then graph. You can see that they are much smaller. You can see on the large screen here, it's easier to see. But I think that this smaller mark is much better to use when you have a ton of data. That's what I would use for that. So just to recap how to make a scatter plot, first you have to enter the data here in list 1 and list 2. Then we go to Scatplot. Make sure that your first plot is on, that you have the scatter plot selected, and that your X list is from list 1, your Y list from list 2. And let's go back to that. And then most importantly, make sure that your window fits the data that you are entering into the calculator. So you've got to check your lists and look for your minimums and your maximums and choose an appropriate scale. And then there's our graph. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Check out my next tutorial, which will be up soon, which will be finding the linear regression line for this scatter plot. All right, thanks everybody.